Hello and welcome to PSA's Let's Squawk About It. I'm PSA's marketing manager, Sam Schaefer, and today we're doing a follow-up episode from an interview we conducted last fall when we met with Kevin Downs of Middle Tennessee State University. I'm pleased to welcome back Kevin, as well as Joseph Gulizia with Auburn University, who is heavily involved in this research. To start with, why don't you both introduce yourselves?
So I'm Joseph Gulizia, and I'm currently a PhD student here at Auburn University. I work with Dr. Wilmer Pacheco, and we focus more in feed milling and nutrition. And so I think it's really great that we can kind of have this dual effort here, getting the feed mill experience and the nutrition side. I've been focused more in my master's research, more on exogenous enzymes. So I've completed a couple trials with that, and we are looking forward to doing future research for my PhD with looking into antibiotic alternatives.
Very good. And Kevin, welcome back. I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Sam. We appreciate the opportunity to visit with you again. I'm Kevin Downs, professor in the School of Agriculture at MTSU. I've been here for almost 22 years, so I've been here a while. Joe was one of my former students, the best I've ever had. I'll say that up front. So he's pretty amazing. But we have a poultry science program here, a fairly small program, but decently active, and we do some undergraduate research, and that's kind of the impetus of where this color research all came from.
Yeah, and kind of like you just mentioned, Kevin, this study has to do with color research, and it falls back to an episode that we did last fall. And from what I understand, Joe, you kind of spearheaded this project. You came up with the idea, and Kevin gave you his full support. So I just want to kind of real quickly touch base on what this project was and what you were looking at.
So the most recent trial that we conducted looked at more specific colors from our initial trial. So with this research, we looked at how blue and purple feed, or the coloring of the feed blue or purple, how that could influence feed intake. And where that comes from is sort of our initial trial. We did a variety of colors from the first episode that Dr. Kevin Downs spoke about, with red, green, blue, yellow, orange, and purple. And from that, we saw that blue and purple, we saw some minor performance effects within those treatments. And so we thought with this latest trial, we could kind of flesh out more of those effects and see what kind of cumulative feed intake influence it would have on the broilers.
Right. Yeah. So this study dove in a little bit further with specific colors in mind.
Right.
Great. Very good. So what we're doing is, now that you guys have taken another look at this, let's talk about what you concluded from the research.
Yeah, I can take that, I guess. This study, the second study, because the first study that Joe was more intimately involved with when he was a student here, actually did look at a variety of different colors. But what was unique about those first studies were the birds, or maybe was unique about the follow-up study. Those birds in those first studies, they didn't have a choice. There was no choice. If they were given red, all the birds in that pen had no choice but to eat red, and et cetera with the other colors. And so we wanted to follow up because as Joe mentioned, it's true, we saw some moderate effects of blue and purple. The assumption there was that birds seeing on that shorter wavelength of the visual spectrum into that ultraviolet area, maybe the blue, maybe the purple, maybe that's why we saw some of those minor effects. So let's follow that up, looking at only blue and purple, but giving the birds a choice between a typical control diet, a typical industry type diet, if you will, versus blue, or giving them the option of a control type diet, more of an industry type diet, or purple, and then give the option to choose between either blue or purple. And so we not only looked at the effects of the blue and purple more intensely, but we also looked at least feed consumption relative to when the birds got an actual choice between the two colors. And so that's where it got a little bit interesting, because there seemed to be, and there wasn't anything massively effective here in the second study when given the choice, but it was clear evidence the birds were there, at least from the feed consumption standpoint. The colors was an aversion for the birds. Birds did not, there's a clear effect, birds did not consume the colored feed anywhere to the extent they did with the more typical control diet. And so that was interesting, but if you take it one step further, when the birds were only given the option to choose between blue and purple. Then we take it one step beyond that, where the birds were even more, had more aversion to blue relative to purple. So I thought it was interesting. I don't, I think our research is interesting. I don't know that we're, revolutionizing what might be done in the industry relative to, are we going to start coloring feed in the industry? I don't think that's, I don't think that's in the cards. Just the cost of doing that, in addition to the clear effect on feed consumption we saw in our study was small, but it's pretty clear, and thus feed conversion effect, it led to an effect on bird performance with the birds on purple when given the option of purple or control or blue and control didn't perform to the same level as if they were just given say a control diet with nothing but sort of industry type standard diet. So it's interesting. I don't know if where it goes from here, but it is interesting result.
My thought process would have been, when we talked about it the first time, that maybe there would have been more of an appeal towards different colors, but it sounds like it went the opposite direction.
And that was kind of what we thought too. It was, okay, well, in the first study, the birds given only blue or only purple, they performed a little bit better than say birds only given red or only given green or the other colors. And so we took it there and said, okay, well, let's give them a choice. And so clearly when you give them a choice, they don't prefer the colored feed.
They want what they're used to.
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff. Well, looking at what you've done now and what you know now from it, what area would you say that this could fall into in the future? What further research could be done in this sort of topic?
Yeah, I think we've kind of exhausted what we can do at MTSU regarding this type of research. I think, we've been able to get some good preliminary data with our very first trial, just allowing them one singular colored feed versus our second trial, giving them a choice, and we can see that decreased feed intake when we do allow them to choose. And if we wanted to take it any further beyond what we've been able to do, we would need to do a larger scale study, probably in floor pens, and seeing that different dynamic on more of something more relatable to the industry versus, having them in battery cages with our study. So I think that's where the future of the research would need to go. I'm not sure Dr. Downs has the ability to do that at MTSU. But I think that's the next step for the feed color research, and I think it'll be into someone else's hands if they want to go down that road.
And it is interesting. I mean, the other area that I kind of think of is, who knows what type of effect this would have on other species, whether it be, waterfowl, turkeys, that kind of stuff, and, could prove to be interesting in those cases too.
And I think, and we ran into this as well, Joe, more than I did when you look at some of the previous research, and a lot of it tied in feed color with actual lighting color as well. And so there's something that, maybe there's more an effect there with changing lighting and changing feed. Maybe you see more of an effect also. Yeah, and Joe can speak more to this than I can. He's much more of a feed milling expert than I am, but I know he's got some more anecdotal experience with this. Is there is some, not for purposes that we set out to kind of elicit, but there is some industry coloring of feed, but more from the standpoint of identifying this feed from that feed when it comes to actually feeding the birds or in research type settings. And so it is interesting that, you can take a little bit from that also, is that we didn't at least see a dramatically negative effect. We did see some, aversion to it, but the birds still, all in all, they performed at a relatively decent level.
That's important. Looking at it more on a research standpoint, if we're using color to, as Dr. Downs said, to know which treatments are which, that's important to know that you're not influencing it based off the color. And there are various ingredients that could also impact the color of a feed. So if you're feeding treatments that have a different ingredient and it maybe determines or differentiates the color by a certain hue or something like that, then it's good to know that we're not going to have that difference based on feed color. But again, that still needs to be more fleshed out with further research to be able to know if there's not a negative impact on feed intake.
I think this is definitely something that could open the gates, so to speak, for new research opportunities. And I kind of like the way you mentioned, Dr. Downs, about the possibility of lighting impact on colored feed. That could be a study all on its own too, just seeing how light affects, just one feed color even.
Right.
All right. Well, very good, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me today. Like I said, just a quick follow-up on the research you guys had done previously. Very interesting stuff. And I'm glad to see you guys got kind of an answer out of it, it seems like.
Right. Yeah, it was an interesting follow-up. We were fortunate enough to have the facilities that we could, do kind of a preferential feed color effect. So it was interesting to see, and it engaged some of our undergraduate students here in research too, which was important also. So
some excellent experience working in that as they look forward to their future and following in the path that Joe is doing right now and going to grad school. Very good. Well, thank you guys so much. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later.
thanks,
Thank you.
Sam.